The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig Fahle, and as you can see, my regular co-hosts are not here. We have one that is attending some sort of conference down in Nashville, hopefully getting some country music in his soul, and the other one is over in Morocco. So I'm stuck with Steve Fishman today, local, noted attorney. Not stuck with it all. Very glad to have him here actually today. Thanks for being here.
No problem. We'll just do it solo, that's all.
Well, look, I'm glad you're here because a lot of stuff going on right now, and there's a lot of confusion out there about how this whole process is supposed to work when it comes to impeachment, grand jury testimony, all kinds of different stuff that's going on. Stunts in the so-called skiff room. We've had a weird week when it comes to politics here. We've got to start with the impeachment process and what's going on right now. The week started with this testimony from the ambassador to Ukraine, who, Bill Taylor is his name, career diplomat, worked for many different presidents, and just came out and said, look, this was pretty obviously a quid pro quo. They were not going to give them the aid until he said publicly that he was going to launch an investigation into Joe Biden, which obviously, who knows where that stuff's coming from. But he was talking about a shadow operation and a different team. They were supposed to be the ones doing the negotiating, but Rudy Giuliani was out there doing his own thing. Very, very strange week and damaging testimony.
Well, first thing, William Taylor is more than just a career diplomat. This is a West Point graduate who spent his entire career, he was a Vietnam vet, spent his career in the Army, and then he has worked, as you said, for every administration, I think since the original George Bush administration, which would cover Republicans and Democrats. The man's of impeccable character. And for the life of me, I'd love to know what someone's going to come up with as some nefarious reason for why he said what he said and did what he did. And it also bears noting that this was not a guy just sitting there talking from memory. When people work in the government, particularly when you're working in a dysfunctional government like we now have, anybody that doesn't take notes and, if possible, tape stuff to back up what they say is going to be called all kinds of names, and not just on Twitter. And when you read his opening statement, 15 pages, I read every word.
Yep.
And I encouraged every citizen I bumped into to read every word. It's pretty clear that A, what you said is true. They were running a rogue operation. B, there's no doubt in anybody's mind. There's no doubt that there was a quid pro quo. And C, these guys keep talking about they feel terrible. Trump didn't have a lawyer in there to cross-examine him. I'd like to see the guy cross-examine William Taylor. I think I'm a pretty good cross-examiner. I can't imagine too much I'd have to say to him about why he was saying what he was saying, other than the fact that it was the pure and absolute truth.
Well, and that's the whole thing. So this is not a messenger they can attack very easily. There were some attempts to sit there and say he might be a never-Trumper, which the president in a tweet referred to never-Trumpers as human scum the other day. Members of his own party who don't support him are human scum, he said this week, which is really interesting, I thought. These are the people that you're going to need to keep on your side. And if there are people who are having doubts or wavering a little bit, attacking them personally is probably not going to help. But it seems that they are in absolute chaos right now and how to respond to this. Republicans are trying to rally to his defense in some capacity, but all they've got now is to argue about the process.
And that's exactly what they've decided to do. You talk about moving the goalposts. These guys moved the goalposts as many times as they could. When the unnamed person came forward, they said, oh, well, who knows who he or she is? They're probably some kind of a criminal, or they're a never-Trumper or whatever. And then as more people started testifying, it's not just Taylor. I mean, he's not the only person that's laid out exactly what happened. They start moving the posts, and now they've settled on, at least in my view, the only thing that they can say, which is, well, the process stinks. We're getting screwed. The president should have his fantastic lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, in there cross-examining William Taylor, which would be literally a sideshow if you had a chance to watch it.
Well, I'm sure it would, but Giuliani, it seems to me, might be the subject of a lot of the discussions that are going on in there, so he, of course, should not be in there.
My guess, and this is just a guess, when his two associates were indicted. And keep in mind how they were arrested. They're on their way out of the country to the country. They're citizens here, but they're to a different country with one-way tickets. And they wonder why they grabbed them then, because you go off to wherever you go, and it's kind of hard to get a hold of people.
Yeah.
Most people, as we discussed this the last time I was on, most people that find themselves in a position of where we might go to jail for this stuff tend to talk. And that means they cooperate with the authorities. Manafort's really the only person that, pretended to cooperate and then lied. And I have to tell you, in all of the time I've been a criminal lawyer and I've dealt with the federal government, countless occasions, once someone decides to cooperate, he's the only person I've ever seen to go in and just absolutely lie and screw himself. I mean, that was fascinating. But my guess is these two guys, at some point in time, they're going to sit down with their lawyers and they're going to make a deal with the government. And who else are they going to talk about other than Mr. Giuliani? And can there be more poetic justice than seeing this ranting, raving screwball walking in as a defendant in the United States versus Giuliani? That, to me, would just be...
A former prosecutor. This is the guy who made his bones taking down the mob in New York. So there is, I mean, I just wonder from your perspective, as somebody who's been watching these people and dealt with the federal government and prosecutors as much as you have, I mean, how does that make you feel, knowing that this guy might be under this type of criminal scrutiny pretty soon?
I think we talked about it the last time I was on. I do believe, in all honesty, that he, like many other people, as they get into their older age, they want to be relevant again. They don't feel like they're getting their props or whatever, and they start doing silly things. But he's carried it to an extreme. I mean, this isn't just silliness. This could be criminal. It probably is criminal. It's just a matter of whether they decide to do something about it. If your question is, have I ever seen someone who was the United States attorney in any district behave like this, the answer is clearly no. I've never seen anybody that would in any way, shape, or form agree to get involved in something like that.
All right. Well, let's talk process here for just a second, because this is where the Republicans are trying to make their bed right now, saying that the process is flawed, although this is the exact same process they used in the Benghazi hearings, the exact same process they used in the email hearings against Hillary Clinton, using the so-called skiff room, which is a place where you can't have any recordings, you don't have outside people. So the Republicans pulled this stunt trying to crash the room the other day, potentially violating a couple of rules. But
well, they brought cell phones in there, which violates the rule absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So they brought cell phones in there, and they're saying we have a right to be present, although there are 45 members of the Republican caucus who actually have access to all of these hearings because they're on the relevant committees that are holding these hearings. So it's not as if they don't have representation there or they're being shut out of the process. They have equal time to ask questions, equal time to go over, the testimony with the witnesses. But having it in this safe room in the basement, which they're trying to say makes it somehow shady, this is where this kind of grand jury type stuff happens, isn't it?
Well,
it's not a grand jury, but
let me talk about both things. Number one, it's obvious to me, and I think to anybody that's paying attention, that was nothing but a stunt.
Yeah.
When they went down there, and I can guarantee you that's exactly the type of stunt you would expect to come from Trump. And they probably either checked with him or certainly knew that he would approve of it because he's an extra legal person. He doesn't care about the legal system. He obviously has never really participated in it as you should. And they just that was a stunt. The second thing is, I think there's a general misunderstanding. I even read something in either the Times or the Washington Post. There's a misunderstanding of what goes on in a grand jury. This is not a grand jury hearing, but if you analogize it to it, when there's a grand jury, the only people allowed in the grand jury room, it doesn't have to be locked in a basement called a skiff room. It could be on the 8th floor of the federal building. The only people allowed in the grand jury room are the members of the grand jury, the witness, the agent in charge of the case, and the assistant United States attorney who is performing the investigation, who's questioning the witness. There is no place for the target, which would be Trump in this instance, and there's no place for his lawyer either. I've represented witnesses, and I've obviously represented people who've been targets of grand jury. I've never set foot in a grand jury room, nor has any other criminal defense lawyer. So to make it sound like this is something that it happens every day in every district in the United States, where grand juries are brought in, they hear witnesses, they get evidence, there's no defendant there, no target there, and neither is his or her lawyer.
And so basically, as a lawyer for somebody who's undergoing questioning in this type of a situation, you get to sit out in the hallway, and if they need to ask you a question, they can come out and do so.
The witness has the right, if he or she chooses to do it, to come out after every question. And sometimes, I'm not going to say there's not a little jousting around where you feel they might be being a little bit unfair to the witness. And after the witness comes out 5 times, they'll usually call a halt. The prosecutor will come, all right, Steve, what is this all about? And I said, well, what we really need to know, boom, boom, boom. And we work it out. But the witness has every right to come out and talk to the lawyer. But what people are missing is the lawyer has no right to be inside the grand jury room. So if we're analogizing these preliminary hearings where they're taking testimony,
and that's what this is. They're still in fact-finding mode here.
Exactly. Now, if you're asking me, do I think they should do it publicly before they bring it up for a vote, let's say? Absolutely. I think, and I can't believe they're not going to do that, to put people like William Taylor, and I can't remember some of the names, there were a couple, Marie Jovanovic or whatever, to not put them out for the public to see would be insane. So I have to believe that they're going to have public hearings, and they're going to let them and then we'll find out how brilliant these Republican lawyers are, the ones they claim should be in there cross-examining, because they'll have every chance to cross-examine the former ambassador and to cross-examine Mr. Taylor. And I personally can't wait to see that circus.
And it will be.
Because they're going to make jackasses out of whoever it is that's questioning them, particularly if you try to be a partisan, which is what the committee members are going to do because they don't know anything different. Jim Jordan questioning Mr. Taylor, let's see.
They're still talking about a lot of other things, right? They're still saying, well, we need to hear from the whistleblower. We need to unmask the whistleblower. Seems to me that after listening to Taylor the other day, that the whistleblower is completely irrelevant now. He just brought it to light. Taylor filled in all the gaps there.
Let me give you an analogy again to not just a grand jury, but to any federal investigation. A citizen could come to the government, to an agent or to who, and bring up something. There's some criminality going on over at 7 Mile in Livernois. Okay? The government then launches an investigation based on what could be complete hearsay. The witness, whistleblower, wouldn't be called a whistleblower in a normal case, just says, hey, I hear over on 7 Mile in Livernois there's a lot of dope dealing going on. The government goes out, they launch an investigation, they start looking, they get people who work undercover officers go there, they get somebody else who's a cooperating person, and they establish a case against the guys who are selling dope on 7 Mile in Livernois. The defense lawyer, neither the defense lawyer nor the defendants who get charged have any right ever to find out who it was that originally blew the whistle. It's not a whistleblower in the sense that it's protected like this whistleblower was, but somebody can launch an investigation and never, ever be identified because it's the investigation itself that matters. It's the evidence that's found as you investigate that matters. So when Taylor or the former ambassador, when they testify, that's not hearsay. Taylor's talking about text messages he got from this guy Sondland. Yep. He's talking about things he heard with his own ears. So there is no basis in the law for requiring the government ever to identify, whether you call it a whistleblower like in this case or a cooperator like in 7 Mile in Livernois case.
Okay, then explain what's going on then with Attorney General Bill Barr right now in this investigation into the origins of the Russia investigation. They now say somebody leaked out that this is now entering a criminal investigation phase, which I'm not sure exactly what the criminality here is or what potential thing they might be looking at, but that certainly seems as if they are trying to do exactly what you suggest that they don't have a right to do.
Well, I read that headline on the Washington Post online at about 5:45 this morning before I went to the gym. And driving, I was thinking, criminal investigation as to what? So we don't know. But what we do know, obviously we all know, that William Barr is the farthest thing from an impartial attorney general. He was willing to go out in public with a straight face and completely misrepresent the Mueller report, completely. Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form. He was willing to travel to, was it Italy or overseas, to pursue this crazy stuff that the Ukraine has got the server. I mean, are you kidding? Seriously? So it wouldn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form if he's not doing this. He tapped this guy, Durham from Connecticut, and my guess is he didn't tap him by accident. He didn't ask Barb McQuaid to do it or somebody like that. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if the whole purpose of it is just more smoke.
Well, it's a shiny object over here.
Exactly.
But it's getting harder and harder for them to come up with new shiny objects because people are starting to pay attention to this stuff. And it seems, you look at the polling data and how it just keeps creeping up and up and up for support for, one, the investigation, two, potential removal from office. Those numbers are starting to really parallel each other, and they're getting over 50% across the board, which we weren't even this close when Nixon got impeached. I don't think they got to this point until like a couple of weeks before he resigned.
Well, people forget. You got to be as old as me to remember what was going on there. The Republican Party was pretty much in lockstep with Nixon in those days, and it was Sirica's ruling that finally turning over the tapes, that's when all of them got religion, and Hugh Scott and Barry Goldwater and all of them marched over to the White House and told him, look, son, you're done. So you may as well do it the easy way rather than the hard way. People forget that. I agree with you 100%. I will tell you, I saw a little clip of George Will, who's a very conservative man, right? But he's certainly an anti-Trumper.
Yes, he is.
But he's so well-spoken. And what he said was, and I think it's really relevant to just what you said about the polls. He said, some people run for Congress because they want to do something, and others run for Congress because they want to be something. Unfortunately, he said, more of our members want to be something than they want to do something. And being something means continuing in your job.
Yeah.
And as those numbers creep up, it's hard for me to believe that any fair-minded public servant, I don't care how Republican that person is, can have anything but contempt for Donald Trump. I mean, everybody knows what he is. They know he's a career criminal. They know he's completely uninformed. They know he's liable to do anything at any time that could cause great damage to the country, okay? They don't have... I won't say it on. Oh, maybe you can say it on this.
Say whatever you want.
Yeah, they don't have the Batesum. Batesum in Yiddish means the balls.
Yes.
They don't have the balls. It really means eggs, by the way, but it turns into
close
balls.
enough.
They don't have the balls to be number 2 guy to Mitt Romney, let's say. But if 10 of them decide all at the same time that, hey, now it's up to 61%, 62%, then maybe we'll see something happen. The evidence is indisputable. Let's put it that way. We just go from there.
Well, let's switch to another interesting story, and this also has to deal with federal law enforcement. The Secret Service apparently paid a visit to Eminem. He sang a song. He wrote in a song that the Secret Service come because he had written some lyrics that, sort of fantasized about potentially harming the president in some capacity. And so the Secret Service came over and visited him and said, what are you doing? You got to knock this off. Are you a potential threat? They were checking to see whether or not Eminem, the rapper, was a potential threat. And people don't realize how seriously the Secret Service takes that kind of stuff. Even if it's in jest, you could find yourself in a whole lot of trouble.
I think that you said it exactly right. People underestimate the Secret Service's commitment, let's say, to making sure that nothing happens to not just the president, but anybody else that's in their charge. And yeah, I think you got to, I don't think they seriously thought that when they went there, but they feel, I'm sure, that the lyrics were out there. You have to, whether it's Eminem or it's just some guy standing on Davison, you have to go and just, because it's Eminem, it becomes a big deal. But
yeah.
I'm certain that there are visits paid by the Secret Service to many of our citizens, during the time any president's in office.
That's got to be unnerving. Imagine that knock on the door. Those guys in those suits with the little earpieces in there. You're like, what'd I do?
Well, Eminem, I obviously don't know the man, but my guess is he's probably been used to a few unnerving things happening, whether it was on 8 Mile or somewhere else.
That's right. My guest, Steve Fishman, again, here on The Week That Was on Deadline Detroit. Thanks for watching, everybody. Some other stuff that's going on, too. Founders Brewery. You've been following this story at all? And that's why I'm so glad I have a lawyer with me today, because...
let me cut you. I just saw the headlines about it literally when I got to the office, and I did not read the articles. I was too busy reading about the Piston game and how Trae Young lit us up for 38.
Yeah, well, they're 1-1. Who knows? I don't know what the season's going to be.
We could talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
I'll give you my opinion.
But there's an interesting situation. A guy named Tracy Evans used to be a manager there. He got fired, and he, of course, said that it's basically a racial discrimination case that he filed against them, in which he said that they used the N-word and did some other things against him. So there's a lawsuit going on around this. But what made this stand out is the testimony from one of the founders' employees that was above him, and they asked him a simple question. Would you admit that this guy is black? Well, I don't know that. Well, I don't know his lineage, so I can't answer that. It's a really, really strange deposition. So the Metro Times got the transcript for this deposition, and the guy just said, well, I don't know enough, so I don't assume to know if he's black or not. He just couldn't answer the most basic question, and they're in the middle of already bad PR around this. And now you've got all sorts of bars around town that are like, we're not carrying this stuff anymore. It was just clearly somebody in a deposition not wanting to make a mistake. But it doesn't seem like that would have been that hard a question.
If your question is why would somebody do something like that, the answer is one of two things. Either for whatever reason, the lawyer representing them told them to be very careful when you answer questions, because I've seen this happen. I'm a criminal lawyer. I don't really get involved in depositions.
Yeah.
But there have been times where my guys have been deposed, and I'll have to interrupt sometimes and say, just ask him the question. He's not trying to beat around the bush. So sometimes lawyers tell people to be really, really careful. That makes no sense in this instance, okay? The other thing is that he, on his own, decided he wasn't committing himself to anything. But my guess is, if I had to guess, I'd say somehow that witness got the impression from the lawyer that you don't concede anything. Like, what's your birthday? I can't remember. Is he black? The guy's black. Who are we kidding?
Well, he basically was like, well, I can't tell. I don't know his DNA, so I can't say whether or not he's black. It's like, I don't understand why there's any potential danger in that question. Why they would ask it in the first place.
Craig, I'm a criminal lawyer. I can't explain why civil lawyers do what they do. That's all I can tell you.
But what's interesting is that the company said, look, he was just trying not to make a mistake in this deposition, and that's why he answered the way that he did. Well, like I said, but a whole lot of people around town are like, it's not good enough. Just all you have to do is say, hey, we're going to do better as a company. We're going to make sure that we get the training that we need so that employees, we don't have these types of incidents. Now, granted, they don't want to admit because they don't want to lose the case, so they can't really admit it. But their stance has been enough to get they're closing down the Founders Brewery that just opened up temporarily.
I saw it.
For fear for employee safety. Well, yeah, there might be some backlash because the company it's horribly done PR-wise.
Yeah, look at you. I don't know anything about public relations, and particularly in this day and age, as we were talking about before, with all the different ways to communicate in social media. I'm 70 years old. I still got a flip phone. I don't really participate.
I've seen the flip phone. He is not lying.
I don't participate in this kind of stuff, so I can't offer an opinion. I can just tell you what I told you about how someone might say something like that at a deposition. It probably comes from either the lawyers or the whatever the company line is supposed to be. That's the only thing I could think about.
Well, it's not working out well for them.
No, I saw the headlines.
They're closing this, and a ton of bars are just stopping to sell their product too. So they're the second largest brewery in Michigan. They're in trouble. We'll see what they decide to do with that. Let's talk a little bit about Mike Duggan, my former, full disclosure, I used to work over at the Land Bank, did a lot of work with his communications team, obviously. This was a mistake. Having people delete emails is never a good thing because even if there's nothing in those emails and they put them out and they showed that they were actually pretty harmless, but for the most part, if you look like you're trying to cover something up, people are going to assume you're covering something up.
I think that's true. I don't know really any of the facts of it. I kind of have skimmed the Free Press articles about it. Yeah. I got a general idea of it, but I agree with you 100% that I think things come out in this day and age. It's almost impossible to keep a secret about anything anymore because A, people talk, B, social media gets you, and then C, what you said is if you try to, what somebody's going to say, cover something up, it's going to be like the flu.
Yeah.
It's going to go from one person to the next. And to me, it's almost always better to release things and put your own spin on it when you release it than to wait for something like this to happen. I think you see it all the time. Cover-ups unravel. I don't know if this is a cover-up or not. I know that they do good work, the charity. I know that much just from what I've read. But you're always going to have problems if you...
Well, so the mayor came out and basically tried to take some of the blame himself, saying, look, I put a lot of pressure on these people because of this stuff that Bob Carmack was doing, and everything else. And I see this sort of circle the wagons mentality that can emerge when you get in a situation like that, and we had a lot of different things that we were working on where what's going on? Yeah. What do we know? What do we not know?
I'm not so sure that's a circle the wagons mentality. I give the mayor a lot of credit for saying that. A lot of politicians, as you well know and we all know, the first sign of trouble, look at the Clintons, the people they abandoned.
Yeah.
Lanny Guinier, right? So they're supposed to go to law school with them. Now, I give him credit for saying that. And there's probably a lot of truth to it. There's so much going on all the time. And again, the focus from both the regular media, then the social media. There's so many things. It's not like, it's not your daddy's government anymore, like it was in 1962, where nobody knew anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I could, and you know as well as I do, anybody that worked for somebody, if you have a feeling that something is important to the boss, even if the boss didn't tell you to do X, Y, or Z, you think, look, they covered up the John McCain, the USS John McCain, right? Because they know knucklehead Trump might see it and he'll go crazy.
Right.
You got a ship named after a real war hero rather than a guy who had bone spurs or whatever he claimed he had.
Well, I wanted to get to this one because this is my favorite idiot of the week, as I like to call them. There's this county commissioner down in Tennessee, in Sevier County, which apparently is over where Dollywood and Gatlinburg and all that kind of stuff is, was talking about, a resolution in support of gun rights in there when they want to make it a gun-safe zone or something like that. So sanctuary city for guns. That's what they want to become, which, whatever. But so he just decides in the middle of this meeting that he needs to go on a rant about the Democrats. And here's what he said. Hey, we got a queer running on the Democrat side, and if that ain't ugly enough, and then he goes about, and this is my always favorite thing, he goes, and I'm not prejudiced, but, and when somebody says, I'm not prejudiced, but, that the next thing coming out of their mouth is going to be really, really stupid. And here's what he said. I'm not prejudiced, but by golly, a white male in this country has very few rights, and they're getting took more every day. And I'm thinking to myself, what planet are these people living on?
I read about that when it came out because of the fact, that he said he wasn't prejudiced, which, some of my best friends are Jews, but...
He did that the next day when they asked him to clarify. He said, I have some black friends.
Of course. Like, okay. Everybody has black friends to show that they aren't prejudiced, right? Because they, met the guy walking down the street. Unfortunately, and, we all have to read a lot more than just the Washington Post and the New York Times. And I tend to read Hugh Hewitt's column in the Washington Post, and I read a guy named Gary Abernathy. I think he is somewhere in Iowa. And I read it because I want to see, and there's an awful lot of people that think like that. The difference between most people and that guy is most people got enough sense not to say it publicly where it's going to wind up in a national news media. But I think it'd be foolish for those of us who are urban and multicultural to assume that everybody's like us. That's as far from the truth as you can get. And I honestly do believe that a major part of Trump's strategy is to continue to reinforce the notion that, hey, these are elitists, these people, they're multicultural, they got black friends and they got Jewish friends and they have gay friends, and we don't want to be like that. And if we don't want to be like that, vote for me and keep me in office. I really think that that's a significant portion. What is it, that 32%, whatever it is, that support him? There's nothing you could show. I think his statement about shooting the guy on Fifth Avenue, it wouldn't change it.
What about his lawyer's statement that the president could shoot somebody and not be prosecuted for it while he's president? That happened this week as well. I forgot about that one.
I read that. That lawyer, I think, needs to go back to law school and maybe take, criminal law 101. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, it was a very strange argument he was trying to make. The judge didn't seem to be having much of it.
No, well, I don't know how much you have followed some of these arguments in these district courts.
Yeah. And
some of the arguments that they've made, and some of these people are people who work for the government, are so preposterous. I mean, some of the reactions that you read, a judge will look, well, Mr. Smith, are you really saying blah, 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 blah? So, when you're defending the indefensible, it's kind of tough to do. What do they say when the law's not on your side? Argue the facts. If the facts are not on your side, make stuff up. I mean, what are you going to do? There's nothing else to say.
Well, it seems to be that's where we are right now. All right, let's move on. Just we've got a few minutes left. I do want to talk some sports here because you are, of course, the pride of Mumford High School, former All-State basketball player, also played at the University of Michigan. Huge Michigan fan, obviously, and basketball fan. Pistons are 1-1. I don't know. I can't tell if this team's going to be halfway decent or not.
Well, I watched, I didn't see the Indiana game, but I watched the entire game last night. And you got to keep in mind that their best player is not playing because he's hurt. And Jackson played, I don't know, maybe 8 minutes. His back was bad. I think it's early in the game to start. People are jumping to conclusions. The league is wide open. And the key to me, watching particularly last night, Derrick Rose was fantastic. If he can stay healthy. This is a former MVP of the league. Well, but you have a great coach. Dwayne Casey is a great coach, and he knows you can't have him. He only played he had 27, but it was only in 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And he knows that he's had injury history, and I think that you got to wait and see. You got to see how healthy Griffin is. Drummond plays hard every night. 32 and 23 in game one.
Yeah.
People don't realize how impossible that is unless you're a great athlete. Nobody's going for 32 and 23 rebounds.
No.
He just needs to do it all the time. And
that's all?
Well, look at the great players do. Great
Yeah.
players come to play every night. Jordan came to play. Isaiah Thomas came to play every night. That's the difference between really good guys and the ones who are your great superstars. Kobe Bryant, LeBron, all those guys play hard all the time because everything is a challenge to them. Everything. They never take anything for granted. And that's the biggest difference, at least in basketball, but in athletics in general, I think. But in basketball, I played with a lot of really great players, but not great superstar players because those guys are different, and they bring it every night. And Griffin did it for us last year until the injury. He was bringing it every night.
Yeah.
That's what we need here. And I think if they play that way, they got to be able to shoot well enough, and I think it'll be a decent season. I really do.
I hope so. I would like to see that. The Wings, on the other hand, though, they are not looking good.
I'm not a hockey guy.
I know, but they started out. They started out like a house of fire, and then they've dropped like 6 straight. They're just not looking good at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no.
The Lions,
expertise.
though, you do watch a little football.
I watch.
The Lions got smoked the other day by the Vikings.
Yeah, they gained 540 yards or something like that.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. I mean, the defense wasn't there, and now this team's sort of settling into where we expected them to be.
Here's what I think, in all honesty. I think that football, it's so dependent on health, and injuries. And, you lose a guy like Slay, let's say, who's, he's made All-Pro a couple times, and now he's out. I know they give you the next man up. Well, I played enough basketball to know if I'm the next man up because Tomjanovich got hurt, we're not going to be as good as we were when Tomjanovich was getting his 30 every game.
Yeah.
I really believe that the teams at the end of the year, except for New England, because they're there every year.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, if you look and see, it's who's healthy, it's who's got a contract year, so they're playing hard. I mean, so many things, go into that. And the Lions could have won. They really should have won every game except the Minnesota game.
Yeah.
The running back cost them 2 games, that crazy fumble, and then when he dropped the pass against whoever they played after Kansas City. They got enough talent. I think it's just a matter of staying healthy and how mentally tough you are about it. And I wouldn't give up on them either. Now they'll play a little bit easier games, and we'll see.
All right, last question. Yeah. Michigan takes on Notre Dame under the lights. It's always fun, regardless of whether or not Michigan's got a ton to play for. Obviously, they want to win these games. Jim Harbaugh needs them to win these games. They played well against Penn State. They started out bad, but they had a chance to tie that game except for the drop pass. Michigan fans were none too kind to the player who dropped that pass.
Let me stop you right there and comment on that. As a former player, I thought when I read that was about as disgraceful of conduct. And I know the guy was probably drunk, the one guy, when he sent it. He probably came out of the bar. But the notion that just regular jackoffs who never played anywhere would send stuff like that and talk about a guy like that, who, by the way, was a D1 basketball player. He's going to Memphis
great
State.
Game, too, though.
He's had a great career at Michigan. As a guy who came as a basketball player. And as if he didn't know. Did you see the look on his face on the sideline? And I could not believe it, although I shouldn't be surprised. But the public, always want to ask anybody that's got something critical to say. I always ask the guy, really, where did you play? And if the guy played at Memphis State, okay, you can talk. But we start talking about football, where did you play? And these guys sit on the side and send stuff. It's just completely beyond my comprehension that anybody do anything like that ever played a sport at any level.
Well, it was bad. I was not happy about that. But they have a chance to redeem themselves against Notre Dame. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
For some reason, they actually played offense for the first time in the season in the second half. And if they play offense, although it's supposed to be a complete rainstorm.
Yeah.
And we all know when you watch football in the rain, anything can happen.
Well, very true.
I mean, it's supposed to be like a all day or all night hard rain. So,
well,
that's why I played basketball, by the way, because we played inside.
But, look, Juwan Howard getting ready to start the season.
I think it'll be great fun.
How are they going to look?
I think they'll be fine. They lost some good players. Unfortunately, Wagner's brother broke his wrist, and he's going to be out a little. But they got a lot of good guys, and I think it's going to be a different look. I think Juwan coming from from a pro background, I think you'll see a lot more playing with matchups rather than just the system. And I think that's the way to win in college, quite frankly, because the system, eventually all the film study, et cetera, it gets to be where everybody knows where everybody's going. And the way the pros play, they look, if you can't guard me, they throw it to me every time. And if I get 60, I get 60 until you guys figure out a way that you guard me better or they bring somebody else in. And I think that Juwan's going to bring that mentality. And there's guys there that can play one-on-one basketball. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun.
Well, it should be. I mean, I appreciate you being here, though, today. Steve Fishman, of course, has been my guest, a noted attorney here, and bringing his legal expertise to all these fun questions that we're dealing with on the week that was here on Deadline Detroit. Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering our broadcast today. Nancy and Alan should be back next week, I believe, but we'll have Mr. Fishman back soon as well. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, no problem. Right. Go Blue.
Everybody have a great weekend. Don't forget, this will be available as a podcast. It'll also be available on DeadlineDetroit.com. We'll have the video up probably tomorrow at some point, and of course the podcast will be up this afternoon. But I appreciate everybody checking it out. I appreciate the sponsors, Samaritas and TechTown, for their assistance in putting this together. Do appreciate that very much as well. And mostly, I appreciate all of you who check it out each and every week. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization, doing great stuff all around the state.